He always exchanged words with everybody because it didn't matter what anybody was doing in and around the estate here and everywhere else. They all meant a lot to him, and he always took a very personal interest in everything that they were doing.
Oprah, who? Just 3 words. 3 words that sparked headlines, fueled debate, and left royal watchers wondering what was really happening behind palace walls. For years, Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, built a reputation for staying out of public drama, while other members of the royal family regularly found themselves at the center of media storms. Sophie was often described as one of the monarchy's most dependable figures. She rarely gave explosive interviews. She rarely made controversial statements. And she rarely became the story herself. Yet a recent Channel 5 documentary focusing on Sophie's life and royal journey has brought renewed attention to one of the most discussed chapters of modern royal history. Today, we are diving into what commentators, biographers, and royal observers have said about Sophie's relationship with Meghan Markle, the support she reportedly offered, and why those early interactions continue to attract attention years later. According to commentators featured in the documentary, Sophie was known for helping newer members of the royal family understand the unique pressures of royal life. What many people don't know is that Sophie had experienced many of those challenges herself. When she married Prince Edward in 1999, she entered one of the most scrutinized families in the world. Every appearance, every comment, and every decision was examined by newspapers, television programs, and royal correspondents. Like many people who joined the royal family, she faced difficult adjustments. Over time, however, Sophie gradually earned the trust of senior royals and became one of the most respected working members of the monarchy. That reputation would later become an important part of the story, because several royal commentators have claimed that Sophie offered guidance to both Catherine, Princess of Wales, and Meghan Markle during their early years in royal life. The documentary suggests that these relationships developed very differently, and that difference has become one of the most talked about elements of the entire discussion. Accounts from journalists and royal insiders reveal a picture that is far more complicated than simple headlines suggest. Some observers believe Sophie represented a traditional royal approach built on patience, gradual adaptation, and learning the institution from within. Others argue that Meghan entered royal life with her own experiences, perspectives, and expectations, making comparisons difficult. Years later, documentaries, biographies, interviews, and public commentary continue to revisit those early encounters. Why? Because many people believe they may provide insight into how 2 very different paths eventually emerged inside the royal family. And according to those who have closely followed the monarchy, the story begins long before the public disagreements, the interviews, and the worldwide headlines. It begins with an offer that has since become one of the most frequently discussed moments in royal commentary. Whether that offer was accepted, declined, misunderstood, or simply overstated depends largely on which sources you trust. But there is no doubt that the discussion surrounding it has endured. And that was only the beginning. To understand why this story continues to generate discussion, it helps to look at Sophie's position within the royal family long before Meghan Markle arrived on the scene. Royal insiders often describe Sophie as someone who earned her place gradually. Unlike some royals who immediately became headline figures, Sophie spent years working quietly behind the scenes. Her early years inside the monarchy were not always easy. Like many newcomers to royal life, she faced media scrutiny and public criticism. But instead of fighting every headline, she focused on building trust. Over time, that strategy appeared to work. Journalists covering the royal family increasingly described her as reliable, professional, and discreet. By the time Prince William and Catherine became central figures within the monarchy, Sophie was already viewed as someone who understood how royal life worked. This reputation would become important later. According to commentators featured in documentaries and biographies, Sophie developed a particularly strong relationship with Catherine, Princess of Wales. Accounts from royal correspondents suggest that Catherine took time to adjust to royal duties. Public appearances, state events, media attention, and the expectations attached to the future queen's role created enormous pressure. Throughout those years, Sophie was often described as a supportive presence. Observers frequently pointed to public appearances where the 2 appeared comfortable together. Small moments attracted attention. Shared conversations, quiet smiles, familiar interactions during official engagements. None of these moments were dramatic, Yet many royal watchers viewed them as signs of a genuine friendship. What many people don't know is that these relationships often matter greatly inside the royal family. The monarchy operates through tradition, protocol, and long-term trust. New members must learn unwritten rules that are rarely explained publicly. That is why reports suggesting Sophie offered guidance to Meghan attracted so much attention. According to several royal commentators, Sophie understood exactly how difficult that transition could be. She had lived it herself. Reports discussed in various royal publications claim that Sophie spent time with Meghan during the early period of her relationship with Prince Harry. According to those accounts, conversations took place about royal life, expectations, and family dynamics. The details vary depending on the source. Some accounts describe friendly meetings and practical advice. Others suggest a connection never developed beyond those early discussions. What remains consistent is that commentators frequently point to these interactions as a missed opportunity, not because anyone can know exactly what would have happened, but because hindsight changes everything. People naturally look back at early moments searching for clues. They wonder whether different decisions might have produced different outcomes. That question became even more interesting as public tensions surrounding Harry and Meghan continued to grow. By the time the Sussexes stepped back from royal duties, every previous interaction was being examined again. Journalists revisited old reports, commentators revisited old interviews, and royal observers revisited old assumptions. Suddenly, conversations that once seemed insignificant appeared far more important. Then came the moment that changed everything. Not inside a palace, not during a state visit, but in front of a global television audience. On March 7th, 2021, millions of people around the world watched as Prince Harry and Meghan Markle sat down with Oprah Winfrey. The interview quickly became one of the most discussed royal broadcasts in modern history. Viewers heard allegations, personal experiences, frustrations, and criticisms involving life inside the monarchy. Within hours, news organizations across the world were leading with the story. Television panels debated it. Newspapers analyzed it. Social media exploded with reactions. Supporters and critics appeared almost instantly. For many observers, it felt like a turning point. The interview dominated headlines for weeks. Questions emerged everywhere. How would the royal family respond? Would senior royals address the claims directly? Would relationships inside the family ever recover? Those questions created intense pressure. Then came a moment that royal commentators still discuss years later. Shortly after the interview, Sophie and Prince Edward were approached by reporters. They were asked about the Oprah interview. Prince Edward responded with a brief remark that has since become famous. "Oprah, who?" Sophie followed with a smile and a light-hearted response. "What interview?" The exchange lasted only seconds, yet its impact lasted much longer. Some viewers interpreted the moment as humor. Others saw it as a deliberate effort to avoid discussing the controversy. Still others viewed it as a subtle message about how certain members of the royal family intended to handle the situation. The reaction was immediate. Newspapers covered the comments. Royal commentators debated their meaning. Supporters of Harry and Meghan criticized the exchange. Supporters of the monarchy defended it. The same few words generated entirely different interpretations depending on who was listening. That was where the story became even more complicated, because the debate did not end with the interview. Years later, author and commentator Omid Scobie revisited the moment in his book Endgame. The book generated substantial media attention and renewed discussions about relationships within the royal family. Scobie's interpretation of certain events sparked disagreement among royal commentators, journalists, and readers. Some accepted his perspective. Others strongly challenged it. Once again, Sophie found herself connected to a controversy she had never publicly chosen to expand upon. Accounts from journalists and insiders reveal that differing narratives emerged almost immediately. One side viewed Sophie as a loyal royal protecting the institution. Another viewed her actions through a more critical lens. The result was a debate with no universally accepted conclusion. What happened next may be the most revealing part of the entire story. Because while books, interviews, documentaries, and articles continued discussing the controversy, Sophie herself largely continued doing what she had always done. She worked. She attended engagements. She represented charitable organizations. She carried out official duties. Rather than entering public arguments, she appeared to let her record speak for itself. Whether people viewed that approach positively or negatively often depended on their existing views of the monarchy. But one thing became increasingly difficult to ignore. Sophie's public profile was growing, and the documentary released years later would place that growth directly at the center of the conversation. The full picture was still emerging. By the time the Channel 5 documentary Royal Peacemaker, Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh aired, years of events had already shaped public opinion. That is what made the program so significant. The documentary was not focused primarily on controversy. Instead, it focused on Sophie's journey, her marriage, her mistakes, her recovery, her growth inside the monarchy, and her evolution into one of the institution's most trusted figures. What many people noticed, however, was the way the documentary framed Sophie's relationships with newer royal family members. Accounts from commentators featured in the program suggested that Sophie played an important supportive role during Catherine's early years in royal life. The documentary also referenced reports involving Meghan Markle and the guidance Sophie was said to have offered. For some viewers, this contrast became the most talked about aspect of the entire program, not because new evidence suddenly appeared, but because the documentary encouraged audiences to compare two very different royal journeys. One remained within the institution. The other chose a different path. Those differences have fascinated royal watchers for years. Public reaction reflected that fascination. Supporters of Sophie praised her loyalty, consistency, and willingness to work without seeking attention. Others argued that comparisons between Catherine and Meghan were often unfair because their circumstances were very different. Both viewpoints gained traction online. Both found audiences willing to defend them, and both contributed to ongoing debates about the future of the monarchy. Meanwhile, Sophie's position within the royal family continued to strengthen. Her charitable work expanded. Her public responsibilities increased. Commentators increasingly refer to her as one of the monarchy's most dependable representatives. The title Duchess of Edinburgh added another important chapter to that story. For many observers, it symbolized recognition earned through years of service. Not overnight success, not dramatic headlines, years of steady work. That image became central to how many people viewed Sophie, a royal who rarely dominated front pages, but gradually became one of the institution's most trusted figures. The documentary reinforced that perception.